Sneering at prescriptive advice regarding story structure. That's the title of this video. I'm a rebel. Sort of. Probably it's better to say I'm more of an awkward, irresponsible screw-up who has preferred to think of himself as a rebel all his life. It really hasn't served me well. But I guess it's given me access to a whole world of odd people who also have maladaptive behaviors, a front row to a cast of weirdos. Anyway, my disinclination to follow the rules, my bullish contrarianism, has impacted my writing. You've seen my kind before. You might even belong to the same tribe. We're the ones that the English teacher pulls aside to explain you have to learn the rules before you can break them. That sounds reasonable. But all my life I've loved books written by authors who seem unbothered by or unaware of the rules, whatever those rules might be. Authors like Paul Metcalf, Alistair Gray, Kenneth Patchen, Latremont, Nabokov, Burroughs, Flann O'Brien, Ribley. I take that arrogant position that rules are not meant for me. But what makes me so confident of my abilities to flaunt the rules of writing? Over my shoulder, right there, you'll see the Korg MS-20 Mini. I got into creating electronic music during the pandemic. Oh, I've dabbled over the years in odd experimental noise, sound design, sonic collage, all those useful euphemisms that allow me to avoid using the word music. I feel I need to have a good dose of music theory behind me before I can say what I'm doing is music. However, there are quite a few professional musicians out there whose work I admire who would just shrug and tell me, do whatever I like and call it what I like. Fuck the rules. But I can't. Well, not easily, not with music. My relationship with words is different. Always has been. I blame my parents. They ran a bookstore. It was where I spent so much of my early years. Words did not intimidate me. It can get embarrassing lugging around this brash confidence when I struggle at times with basic grammar. Please don't expect me to diagram a sentence. And my spelling has always been an absolute shit show. And yet, I kept at it. The writing, the slogging along, finding workarounds to hide my weaknesses. At least I hope I've managed to hide them. That and leaning into my strengths. I have this theory, well, not tested, I confess, that most people do know how to craft a story. The world is swimming in the damn things. Movies, TV shows, novels, comic books, folk tales, campfire stories. We've all clocked thousands of hours consuming stories. It should not come as a surprise that my theory falls apart all the time. Plenty of people just can't do it. They might think they can. Maybe someone possesses an ear for the rhythm of speech. Someone who enjoys standing in front of crowds and holding forth. Maybe you've been beguiled by the powerful confidence. A true expert. You give into the ebb and the flow of the language, the aspirated consonants, the glottal stops, the sweet, rounded vowels. This unfolding, melodious, organic motion lulls you into that infantile, prelingual state you enjoyed before you even learned to walk. But if you get a hold of a transcript of that speech later, you're confused. Why, this Trumpian clusterfuck of a word salad is absolutely meaningless. What was I thinking when I rose to my feet cheering? I've recalled some of my own lengthy pronouncements that at the time I spoke them seemed clear and rational, clever even, only to retrospectively find them devoid of anything useful. Most of us, I don't doubt, could do with a little help. But let's sidestep word choice and syntax. I want to focus on larger elements, story structure. I started out talking about structure. So I will say this, putting aside my rebellious nature, I have studied story structure. And I don't mean that I've sat in a classroom where I was taught the mechanics of structure, although I have. It's hard to avoid when taking creative writing classes. I'm talking about going out of my way, purchasing how-to books, listening to podcasts, taking online workshops, and using those techniques to write books. I came up with a very specific structure for my 3 self-published novels. I'm happy with how they turned out, and having that imposed structure helped a lot. And then I drifted away from that kind of heavy structural planning and outlining, with mixed results. The process of writing free of constraints was liberating. So it seemed in the moment. But I found I'd lose sight of where I wanted to go with the story, all because I refused to be shackled to a plan, or because in an impetuous rush, I wanted to get to the work of playing, creating. And now we're back to that rebellious streak, a kind of blind, obligate contrariness. I'm that person who pipes up in disagreement whenever anyone makes a declarative statement, even those sorts of statements not normally considered nuanced or generally up for debate. Cast iron pans are best because they retain heat. The speed of light is a universal constant. Aren't babies the cutest things? Is there really a reason to debate these things? I would say no, not in casual conversation. And yet, I cringe when I realize I'm doing this, often in mid-sentence, because these people are awful. They really are. All it takes is for someone to say, all stories have 3 acts. Okay, I'll get this out of the way. I think it's fine to look at storytelling in the 3-act model. In a sense, it's hard to think of a story in any other way. My problem is that I have a bad habit of making things intentionally complicated. So every now and then I remind myself about the joy of uncomplicated stories. A couple of years ago, me and my girlfriend were taking a long road trip. We took turns sharing our recent musical discoveries. I put on The Well, a song by Smog, a sort of folky, lo-fi singer-songwriter kind of thing. The song starts with a man hanging out alone at the edge of a forest, drinking because he'd lost his job. When his bottle is empty, he flings it in a rage into the forest. Immediately, he feels shame. What if some innocent woodland creature hurts itself on the broken glass? He heads off in search of the bottle. He finds, instead, an old well. As story songs go, there's almost no story at all. But I think of it as a masterclass in story writing. The pacing, the insight, the struggle against despair, the odd humor. In fact, when it was over, I turned to Lori and I said, everything anyone needs to know about writing a story is right there in only 7 minutes. I'm a fan of stories that find the epic in the small or the mundane. Nicholson Baker's The Mezzanine, Swift's Battle of the Books, Pope's Rape of the Lock, Barlow's Hasty Pudding. They all have that bell shape of letting us, the reader, experience the world and the characters before the adventure. Then we're treated on the adventure as it unfolds, and finally, we learn about the consequences of having embarked on the adventure. Swap out adventure for journey or experience, whatever. Recently, I was thinking about 2-act stories. Jokes often work this way. Setup, punchline. The resolution is there, but it's performed by the audience. Their laugh is the 3rd act. Can this get any simpler? A beginning, a middle, an end. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Setup, punchline, realized response. Of course, even if this all sounds reasonable, I'll still find a way to sneer at it. Besides, I'm still at a loss to find the 3-act plotline bell curve in some of the books by Kenneth Patchen. You get the picture. Anyway, thank you. Until later.